Have you ever looked in a mirror and wondered, okay, how did I get my mom's eyes but my dad's curly hair? Well, the answer comes down to a really simple set of rules, the rules of genetics. So today, we're going to break down the three main ways our physical traits get decided.
You know, you can think of genetics as the ultimate story of you. It's literally the biological instruction manual that maps out everything from how tall you are to the color of your hair. And once you kind of learn the language it's written in, you start to understand yourself just a little bit better. I mean, we all play this game, right? You look at old family photos trying to figure out where your features came from. Do you have your grandmother's nose? Is your smile a perfect mix of both your parents? The answers to all of these questions are buried in the fascinating way your genes interact. All right, so to really get how all these rules work, we first need to get on the same page with three key building blocks of genetics. Let's just get our terms straight before we dive in.
First up is a trait. This is super simple. It's just any characteristic you can actually see. Your eye color, that's a trait. Your hair texture is a trait. Even something you might not think about, like whether your earlobes are attached to your head or hang free, yep, that's a trait too.
So what's controlling these traits? Well, that's where genes come in. A gene is basically the specific instruction for one of those traits. And here is the absolute key. For every single trait, you get 2 copies of that instruction, one from each of your parents. But here's the fun part. Those 2 instructions you get aren't always identical. And that brings us to our third term, alleles. Think of it like this. If the gene is the category, like eye color, then the alleles are the specific options within that category, like blue eyes or brown eyes. This is where all our awesome variety comes from.
Okay, so you have 2 alleles for every gene. Now what? How do they interact? Which one gets to be in charge? Do they work together? This is where we get into the 3 main patterns or rules of how our traits are actually passed down. All right, let's start with the one most of us have probably heard about, dominance. A dominant trait is a bit of a show-off. It's a trait that appears even if you only have one single copy of the allele for it. This is why some traits just seem to run so strongly in certain families.
A great way to think about a dominant allele is to picture it as being really assertive. You know, if it's in the room at all, its instruction is the one that gets followed. It pretty much looks at the other allele and says, "Don't worry about it, I got this."
Now, to keep track of all this, scientists use a super simple shorthand. Dominant alleles get a capital letter, and the recessive ones get a lowercase letter. It's just a really easy way to see who's in charge at a glance.
Let's use the classic example of eye color to make this real. Let's say the allele for brown eyes, we'll call it big A, is dominant over the allele for blue eyes, or little a. So if you get 2 copies for brown eyes, AA, you get brown eyes. That makes sense. But here's the key part. Even if you get one of each, AA, you still get brown eyes. Why? Because that dominant capital A allele completely masks the effect of the lowercase a.
So what happens to that other allele, the one that got masked, the one for blue eyes? Well, that brings us to our second pattern, recessive traits. These guys only get to show themselves under very specific circumstances.
And this is a really important point. A recessive allele isn't weaker, it's just quieter. Its instructions are totally fine, they only get heard when there isn't a loud, dominant allele shouting over it.
So the number 1 rule is this. For a recessive trait like blue eyes to actually appear, you must inherit 2 copies of that recessive allele, one from each parent. It's only in that AA combination that the trait finally gets its moment to shine.
But you know, genetics isn't always about one allele winning and one losing. What if neither one is dominant? What happens when both of them are equally assertive? Well, that leads us to our third and really fascinating pattern, codominance.
With codominance, there is no winner. Instead of one covering up the other, both alleles basically agree to share the spotlight. You end up seeing both traits expressed fully and equally at the exact same time. A perfect example of this is something called roan cattle. So, if a cow inherits one allele for red hair, let's say R, and one allele for white hair, W, it doesn't get pink hair. Instead, you literally see individual red hairs and individual white hairs growing right next to each other. Both alleles are fully expressed, creating that roan pattern. And you can see this pattern in other places too. Some flowers have patches of 2 different colors instead of a blend. And a fantastic human example is AB blood type. If you inherit the A allele and the B allele, your body doesn't choose. Your red blood cells express both A and B proteins on their surface. They are truly perfectly codominant.
Okay, I know that was a lot, so let's do a quick side-by-side recap. Seeing these 3 patterns all together is honestly the best way to lock in the differences.
So let's just boil it all down. For a dominant trait, you only need 1 copy of its allele to see it. For a recessive trait, you've got to have 2 copies, and for codominance, both alleles show up together, side by side, sharing the work.
So why does all this matter? I mean, what's the big deal? Well, it's because these simple rules are the foundation of your incredibly complex and completely unique genetic story.
By really getting these concepts, you can start to decode your own family tree. You can see how a trait might suddenly pop up after skipping a generation, or why you and your siblings can look so incredibly different from one another. It's the basic language of your own heritage.
And that's really the magic of it, isn't it? This whole intricate dance of alleles is what makes every single one of us who we are. And honestly, this is just the beginning. Most human traits are actually controlled by hundreds of genes, all working together. It's that incredible complexity that makes you completely genetically unique. It's the engine of all human diversity.
So I'll leave you with this. Think about your family. Think about your own traits. Now that you know the basic rules of the game, what can you decode about your own genetic story?